There's a good reason why Ocean's name was often a sign of quality on the ZX Spectrum. Batman, Bruce Lee, Chase HQ, Daley Thompson, New Zealand Story. Honestly, I could just spend an entire video reading names of Ocean games. It seems if anyone could do it, Ocean could. So who on earth would be able to port a respectable version of Midnight Resistance from the arcade to the homely ZX Spectrum? It's an easy one. I've just given you the answer. It's Ocean. That's what It's Ocean. Midnight Resistance is arguably the most standout of all Ocean titles, and if you disagree, that's fine because I said arguably. From the second the game launches, we're treated to a theme tune with more depth than Spectrum games were typically known for. This kind of thing, of course, was not uncommon when it came to Ocean and their almost lavish showboating. They could make the Spectrum sing, fairly literally, and it was usually always a sign that quality was only a button press away. Midnight Resistance does not disappoint in that regard. So what's the story? Well, it's the future, and everything is all dystopian. You're a member of a resistance team, and your family has been captured by a drug kingpin. I find this a bit of a weird setup, in all honesty. That's pretty much all the story you need, though, because the rest of the game is an endless stream of bullets in a world of urban disarray. Having a story at all is pretty much superfluous to anything that's going on, because the game is, first and foremost, about shooting everything that moves, and even some things that don't move. The clever thing about Midnight Resistance on the ZX Spectrum is it's both a faithful port and completely rebuilt. Sprites are replaced with chunky-looking cartoon visuals that help them stand out from the mountains of colour clash, and levels have changed from smooth scrolling to flip-screen affairs, but all in, if you were to play the arcade original paired with the ZX Spectrum version, you'd instantly be able to recognise them as the same game. One thing that couldn't be ported over, though, were the controls. The arcade version allowed you to control your gun independently with a separate controller, and that kind of crazy futuristic nonsense just wasn't going to fly on the Spectrum. The control scheme they adopted here lies somewhere between awkwardness and something you get used to. As you move left and right, you'll first start to change the arc of your fire until your gun is level. This can make fast manoeuvring a little cumbersome, as instead of running away you can often end up just swinging your gun wildly in the air. The same goes for jumping, which, in the heat of the moment and used in conjunction with shooting, it may instead see you shooting clouds instead of getting the hell out of the way. It's not a deal breaker by any means, and it's a necessary awkwardness to allow the full range of bullet spread that you'll require in order to shoot down the waves of enemies you'll be dealing with. And there is a huge range of enemies here, from standard gunmen to turret guys to tanks to bosses to jetpack spaceship men things. The game consistently fires a torrent of newness at you. It's honestly refreshing to see in a Spectrum game, a lavish sense of variety that lesser titles simply don't offer. That's not to say everything is perfect, mind. The flip screen concession that had to be made in order to get things up and running on the Spectrum leads to death fairly easily, and it's very easy to run face first into a tank, over and over, even when you know it's coming. This works on the flip side as well, though. With repeated play, you'll know exactly what's coming up on the next screen, and you can preempt things before they're even in your line of sight. A stream of bullets can be prepared before flipping the screen, making you feel like some sort of psychic Rambo. It's in these moments, actually, that you begin to realise what Midnight Resistance is all about. It's a memory test as much as a test of the reflexes. I died so many times on the first level alone, but in doing so, I was frequently learning what to do in order to counter it on my next go. Your first Midboss Battle, for instance, with this tank can at first seem like an almost impossibly unfair fight as you wrestle with the control scheme, the stream of bullets, the relatively small viewing area. But as you make your way back here, you're armed with a little bit more knowledge and tactics. You learn where to stand, when to jump, how to avoid. Your fingers become an extension of your brain very quickly. Brain fingers. Bringers. Of course, memorization will only get you so far. There's plenty here that'll require very quick thinking and quick reactions. Not least because your well thought out memory plans may actually go to pot the second you try to execute them. You need to consistently keep your eyes peeled for rogue enemies and even roguer bullets. And this leads me to my final and biggest gripe with Midnight Resistance, and that's visual clarity. Sometimes there is just so much going on. The frame rate is coughing away like a diseased rabbit, and you've got explosions, enemies, bullets, bombs, backgrounds, and everything else just piling up on screen. And things become obscured. It's not difficult for that to happen when the playfield is relatively small, but it was certainly a consistent factor in my ever-increasing death tally. Half the time I simply couldn't see what was coming at me. The other half of the time I was just not very good, but that doesn't discount my poor eyes and their desperation to spot what's going on in this bombastic display of graphical mayhem. All that being said though, my gripes are out of the way and I can get onto the game itself. It's pretty damn incredible. From the music to the level variety to the quality of the port to the action to everything in between, my gripes with the game just weren't enough to hold me back. Every time you think that the game has shown you all it's got, it goes back to the shops and comes back with another carrier bag full of stuff to show you. Every time you think the game is tying things off and coming to a conclusion, it manages to slide another level in there for you to enjoy. It's a big, fat, meaty arcade treasure that is equal parts difficult, doable, and overall exciting to play. It also offers much more choice than your standard run-and-gun arcade title. As you fight your way through each level, you'll notice that enemies drop keys. You can collect these keys, but each time you lose a life, you'll drop your keys. This works much the same as, say, Tails from Sega's classics Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, losing his rings whenever he gets hit. It allows you to run back in and try and retrieve them, although do be careful because you'll end up getting a thing I like to call key vision, whereby you run headfirst into a big wheelbarrow full of bullets because keys! I must have my keys! At the end of each level, you'll shoot your way into a shop where you can use your keys to choose a set of power-ups for the coming level. Practically every upgrade has its uses, from a flamethrower that I will always pick because it shoots fire, to homing missiles that I will also always pick because they shoot missiles that home in on enemies. There are other ones as well, I suppose, like a shotgun or an assault rifle, or a fancy shield that spins around you, but honestly, flamethrower and homing missiles, yes please, I would like to identify as an unstoppable death machine today. Strap those bad boys on my back and away I shall go. Anyway, regardless of whether you pick the correct 2 items or some other rubbish things, the fact is you have choices. You have choices for doing well at the previous level, and that opens you up to 2 things. Number 1, do better. No, do the best. Keep those keys in your pocket and you're going to be consistently thankful that you don't suck. Number 2, each run of the game can potentially open you up to new tactics and new experiences, depending on which power-ups you choose, the flamethrower and the homing missiles. And look, I've already said this, but I really can't quite instill just how varied and interesting the levels in Midnight Resistance are. I just recently praised Rolling Thunder for having varied levels, but this game laughs that one out of the door and shoves a grenade up its arse for good measure. Each level here is insanely varied, from fighting tanks, to crawling through vents, blasting through conveyor belts, fighting other different tanks, fighting Deep Blue in a forest, riding big metal platforms while shooting jetpack men, fighting some cogs, shooting jets out of the air while the moon watches you, falling through the Death Star and shooting people on a ladder, having a lie down in front of a naked man and his lightning-based sex toy, fighting some more cogs, watching TV while doing a sick guitar solo, shooting a battleship so hard that you're not sure which bullets are yours and which ones are the ship's, climbing a really big ladder, unlocking hostages from vending machines, and finally shooting some big faces until you get to a really big face to shoot. And then it ends. And honestly, I've skipped over a lot of stuff there because there's a lot of joy to be had from seeing what comes next. If you've never played the arcade game, you'll no doubt be consistently surprised with what's in store, and if you have played the arcade game, you're going to be consistently surprised with what they managed to pack into a Spectrum cassette tape. It's truly a game that rewards consistently good play, and mark my words, you will need to get good at it if you want to see half of these exciting things that just flash before your eyes. But it is so worth it.